Warning, you're about to see clips of a show that is so vulgar and blatantly offensive that it makes South Park look like Family Guy. It makes Family Guy look like The Simpsons. It makes The Simpsons look like The Simpsons. And just between you and me, it even makes Louis C.K. look like Joe Rogan. And I know what you're thinking, that sounds like some pretty scary stuff. And you're right. It is. Because we're about to look at an adult cartoon from the mid-2000s, the most dangerous time period in television history. So if you're not ready to handle something so insanely hardcore like that, then I suggest you leave now while you still can. Because once you start watching this video, you won't be able to unsee its horror, and you won't be able to resist subscribing to my channel. And you might even join my Discord link in description. So it's time for me to stop stalling for us to get this show on the road. Welcome to the most offensive show ever made, Drawn Together. Now, if I was a betting man, and I ain't, I'd say that most people today probably haven't heard of Drawn Together. It wasn't really that popular when it first aired, and after it was canceled, people kind of forgot about it. So unless it becomes a meme like its Big Brothers,
I'm all out of love. I'm so lost without you.
it's not exactly gonna go viral anytime soon. But if you were growing up as a kid in the 2000s, Drawn Together was the ultimate cartoon, because nothing was as edgy or offensive as this show. It made fun of everything. It was like the Rule 34 of comedy. If you can think of it, they'd make fun of it. It was originally advertised by Comedy Central as the first ever animated reality show. The idea was that a bunch of cartoon characters would be forced to live together in a house where sexy drama would inevitably ensue. It was meant to be a parody of popular reality shows like The Real World, which let them use things like The Confessional to give the show a unique twist. And speaking of twists, take a look at this.
Girl, Foxy Love is gonna teach you how to open up your mind. And your mouth.
The entire marketing campaign for Drawn Together's first season was based around that kiss, which was supposed to tell the audiences, this show's gonna be risky. Ironically, the kiss itself would probably be the least edgy thing about the episode, because where the show really gets its edge is from its characters. Each character was designed as a parody of some other famous cartoon character from the past. Ling Ling is a knockoff of Pikachu, Clara is a white supremacist Disney princess, Captain Hero is a completely insane version of Superman, Foxy Love is a blaxploitation version of Josie and the Pussycats, Xander is Link from Zelda, but he's gay, Toots is a fat Betty Boop, Spanky Ham is Adam Carolla, and Wildor is an even weirder version of SpongeBob.
Look, boys and girls, it's our new friend, the singing Robo-Biker!
Welcome to Wilder's World, where everybody loves vagina.
This show actively uses its diverse cast of characters to be as offensive as it possibly can. Whether it's Ling Ling being used for Asian jokes,
Ting tawa su ting ar.
Captain Hero being a creep,
Let me loose now. Why you frontin' my shit, bitch? You must be.
Clara being casually racist at every given moment,
It must be so frustrating that you're not as buoyant as regular people. We could sell these at $10 a pop and rake in the cash as a new wave of anti-Semitism sweeps the country.
I'll be a monkey's uncle.
Oh, so it's fine when you say it.
or even when they introduce random side characters like Blah, Clara's mentally challenged cousin who can only speak by quoting reviews of the film I Am Sam.
I Am Sam is a well-written and exceptionally well-acted tearjerker, raves Adam Naiman of iWeekly. What the shoebazzle was that?
There is absolutely nothing that is off limits in Drawn Together. They'll make fun of everything from child molestation to Christopher Reeves to Asians being bad at driving. The show is pretty much the epitome of the phrase, they could never make that today, because if they did, it would get canceled multiple times over in just the first 5 minutes of its opening episode. But to understand how a show as offensive as Drawn Together even gets made in the first place, you need to understand what life was like back in the early 2000s. It was a simpler time. The Chappelle Show was still on the air, Newgrounds was the most popular website on the internet, and we all agreed to pretend that racism didn't actually exist anymore, which was easy to do because social media wasn't invented yet. Yes, it was truly an era of unprecedented peace and prosperity, aside from 9/11 and all the wars that were happening. and the mass shootings, and Hurricane Katrina. But with that piece came a shift in how we approached comedy. Since everyone seemed to be getting along on the surface, it meant that everyone was also fair game for a punchline, which gave way to the rise of edgy humor. And with shows like South Park and Family Guy reaching the peak of their popularity, it seemed like pushing the envelope and exploring taboo was what the audiences wanted. So, riding on the backs of their success came Drawn Together, a new show that was hell-bent on outdoing anything that had come before it. Where South Park had some racial humor, Drawn Together was jam-packed with it.
This is the part of the brain that controls negative stereotypical behavior.
Oi, I'll sue you for every penny, and then I'll invest it wisely.
Where Family Guy used random and shocking humor to subvert audience expectations, Drawn Together kicked it up to 11.
Hey, if you're gonna be gay about this, you can't play.
Sorry.
It was the ultimate satire. They found a way to make fun of everything and everyone without wasting time on a moral message. The characters were racist, homophobic, sexist, crude, sexually violent, and pretty much batshit insane. In every way possible, Drawn Together was a product of its time. And at the time, it really felt like the perfect show. I remember watching Drawn Together as a kid back when it first aired in 2004, and I thought it was hilarious. I absolutely loved it. The constant vulgarity and quick pace of the humor really appealed to my f***ed up sensibilities as a kid. I mean, don't forget, it was the most dangerous time in television history. And I was practically raised on The Simpsons, South Park, and Family Guy, so this felt like the natural evolution of everything that they had started. But looking back on it now, I'd say that Drawn Together has failed to age gracefully into the modern era. There was a time when being edgy and offensive was inherently funny because it was new and novel, but when I rewatched the show in preparation for this video, I noticed that a lot of the humor fell flat for me. A lot of the jokes either failed to make me laugh or just felt downright cringe. And it's not because I found them offensive. I still like offensive humor. It's just that a lot of the jokes were too obvious and low-hanging. Outside of the shock factor, they just didn't really have a lot going for them. In fact, the only time I really started laughing hard was when my brother happened to be walking by my door, because the idea that he could overhear the ludicrous shit that was coming out of my speakers was so embarrassing that it honestly made me burst into laughter, which probably says something about the nature of taboo. Maybe this show is funnier in public because of how uncomfortable it is. But when I watched Drawn Together on my own, it just felt like it tried too hard. There were so many shock value jokes crammed into every minute of this show that some episodes barely even had a plot. Like, you know how people used to complain that Family Guy had too many cutaways? Well, Drawn Together takes that to an entirely new level. And in its attempt to be an extreme version of shows like South Park and Family Guy, it ends up feeling more like a bad copy of them than anything else. It lacks its own voice. It's just senseless satire that sticks to the surface level. And that's one of the reasons that it never really stood the test of time, in my opinion. It's got no substance. The storylines are pretty weak, a lot of the jokes are forgettable, but it does have one thing going for it across all 3 seasons. The characters are strong. They do a great job of parodying the real characters that they're based on, and they all have very defined personalities. For example, Clara was like a Disney princess, so naturally she would be naive and bigoted.
Ew, don't touch me.
And the same thing with Spanky. He's played by Adam Carolla, who's crude as so he makes the show crude as
Here is your money, kind sir.
Oh, thank you.
Wait a second. I don't remember ordering this pizza with sausage!
I also just really like Waldor, but unfortunately, strong characters can only do so much without a script that supports them. And because Drawn Together focuses more on rapid-firing jokes than anything else, the characters often feel like they're stuck singing the same note. They lack any sense of depth or dimension. And I think that's the core issue I had with Drawn Together when I did my rewatch. At its best, when the jokes were hitting, it was funny. But when it didn't hit, there was nothing else to hold on to. It was hollow. And I'm not gonna lie, it's kind of disappointing to come back to the show after all these years and realize that my nostalgia didn't hold up. I even awkwardly told my friend Josh to watch it before I did my rewatch. And I just want to say, bro, if you're watching the show right now and I overhyped it for you, that's my bad. I'm sorry. But keep watching, there's some good stuff in there. But I will say this, most of the criticisms that I've mentioned so far are at their worst in season 1, but the show actually does get noticeably better from season 2 onward. The jokes are funnier, the bad jokes are way less frequent, and most importantly, the plot lines are more cohesive. There are actual storylines to follow in season 2. Usually. I mean, they're still incredibly stupid, like the one where the Board of Education is making grape flavored pencils to prevent black kids from getting into college, but it makes the episodes a lot more rewarding when they're not just a series of seemingly disconnected jokes. And the pacing tends to have a little more breathing room to it in season 2, which goes a long way in maintaining my attention span. In my opinion, these improvements start towards the end of season 1 and carry forward into season 2. That's when you'll start to see the more playful meta jokes like this.
I couldn't believe my daughter deliberately disobeyed me. She left me no choice. I had to take her home.
No, Father, no!
Then Clara protested, but, you know, it was too late, so my mind had been made up anyway.
Father, talk to him.
Oh no, I'm not getting in the middle of this.
So if you are curious about Drawn Together, but didn't really enjoy what you saw in season 1, I'd recommend giving season 2 a shot first before making up your mind, because it is noticeably better. But even with the improvements that the show makes, it still never reaches the level of greatness that you'll find from its bigger brothers.
I'm all out of love. I'm so lost without you.
I'd say that Drawn Together at its best is kind of like modern Family Guy at its best. You'll still have fun watching it, but it's not gonna satisfy a hunger for quality. It's like wanting a steak, but you only have enough money for hot dogs. It still tastes good, but you know what you really want.
Steak?
Money's too tight for steak.
Steak?
Sure, steak.
And that's the thing about Drawn Together. It'll never live up to the shows that inspired it, like South Park or Old Family Guy. There just isn't enough going on underneath the hood of Drawn Together. It feels more like a replacement of its heroes than something that's actually new. It's shocking because Family Guy was shocking. It's edgy because South Park was edgy. Sure, it takes these concepts to the extreme, but it does nothing else with them. They're not actually trying to make a statement about anything. It's just satire for the sake of satire using hit or miss jokes. So while it worked in its own time, and it worked when the jokes were well written, it also ended up aging poorly because there was nothing to support the show when the jokes didn't land. And if you're like me, and shocking humor isn't as automatically funny to you as it used to be, then this show might be more of a miss than a hit. But hey, it still ran for 3 seasons and had a made-for-DVD movie, so there are definitely people that love the show. And who knows, that might just be you. But the only way you'll find out is if you give it a chance. I mean, unless you're not dangerous enough to watch the show. But let's be real, you made it to the end of a Slush video, and we both know that means that you're basically the James Bond of slaying pussy. And if you're a girl, you're still the James Bond of slaying pussy. And if you find that offensive, then you're being bigoted towards lesbians, which is pretty offensive. But not as offensive as Drawn Together.